So first of all, thanks for agreeing to sit down with us today. I was actually really taken aback by the immediate response really from your office, to be perfectly honest, and it was brilliant to see that you were interested in doing something like this. So first of all, I want to start out by asking, so say if nobody had heard of Joan Freeman before and this is the first time they've ever heard, how would you maybe describe yourself and your principles?
How would I describe myself? Well, I mean, even though people might know me, they don't know my principles. So how would I describe myself? I think the most important thing is family for me. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a sister, a daughter. And that sort of network is crucial for me, knowing that throughout my life, from the time I'm born until I die, that there's somebody connected to me who's there for me. And I think once you have that, and once you know you have that, you can cope with anything. But also you adapt your family's principles. And my parents were highly principled people, very poor, but highly principled. And I suppose I come from a family of 8 children, and we've all done exceptionally well. From an altruistic point of view. We've done extremely well looking out for society, people in society, and that comes from our parents.
And so, obviously, did you find that there was a big sort of, at least when you were growing up with, obviously, you said there was 8 children in your family, like, was there always big sort of, like, what were the main sort of things that kind of held you together? Because obviously some will see maybe a big group of people and say, well, it's difficult for everyone to sort of get along.
2 things held us together. We always ate together. And I don't know if people realise the importance of that as a family, because you're all sharing a meal, but your parents in particular are able to read signs and faces and expressions of their children, knowing how they are, how they're coping, what's going on for them. And it's an opportunity to talk. And even though I was the 3rd youngest, even though I had to scrabble to get a word in, we all knew that we were there for each other, and we were listening to each other. So that was the most important thing that held us together. And I suppose our faith. My parents were practicing Catholics. It was the typical 50s, 60s era where you said the rosary every night. And as a family, we got down, the 10 of us together, to say the rosary. And again, and we went to church together. We marked all the religious events of the year, and again it was a common denominator between the lot of us, eating together and praying together.
Do you think maybe some of that, like, at least with modern families now, seems to be a bit lost? Because obviously you talk about eating together, and there's always, I know a few of my friends will talk about maybe a lot of the time when they're eating with their family, they'll tend to watch the TV or they'll do other things like that. Do you think maybe that can still be considered as maybe them still bonding over something, or is it just more that people need to sort of start sitting down and chatting to each other at dinner?
Not while they're watching TV, they're not bonding. What has happened is worrying. What's happened to society is very worrying for young people. And that is, parents honestly believe that they're giving their child, they're being kind and generous and loving towards their child by giving them maybe their bedroom, which is filled with maybe a laptop or a PlayStation, or in some cases, cable link. And what they're actually doing is creating a mini apartment for their child. So the house becomes an apartment block where everybody is doing their own thing in their own room. Even children eat in their bedroom. And so there's a lack of coming together as a family, as a unit, where you were just talking. And the iPhone and the television really should be banned for 1 hour a day when the family get together.
Yeah, no, I remember my mum used to do actually stuff like that when we were younger. She had this thing in place where we just, like, 1 hour we're just going to sit down and read a book, like. And I suppose maybe I can see where you come from. Probably is right that now people seem to be so glued to what's going on. It's on social media, and a big thing actually, especially when you want to look at the mental health side of it as well, as people seem to always talk about the likes and dislikes on social media and how that can affect someone's mental health. And a lot of, especially big CEOs, like I know the owner of Twitter has come out and said he was thinking about maybe removing the like button from Twitter because it only encourages people to post stuff for the sake of getting likes. So I suppose, maybe that's it. I do agree with you that maybe people need to sort of take a step back nearly and just almost sort of... Actually, a question about that actually as well. So do you think, obviously we always talk about how the country's going forward and how people are going forward and families together are growing, but do you think that maybe there's a few things we need to maybe hold on to from the past, or maybe go back to from the past, that maybe will help us go forward in the long term?
I think sleep. I think we need to hold on to sleep from the past, because people are not sleeping, especially young people. I mean, if you think of the average 15-year-old, an average 15-year-old needs 9 hours sleep. Now just imagine what they're doing for 9 hours. They're looking at their iPhone, they're looking at Facebook or whatever it is, you know, and the likes and the not likes and all that sort of thing. And so not only is their sleeping disrupted, and I don't believe people realise how crucial sleep is for us to be able to go forward, for our mental health, for anything. So young people are getting less and less sleep. They go to school the next day tired. They're more concerned what other people think about them. And you know, to some degree, I am ashamed of my era, of my generation, because we have allowed the young people of this country to be so self-absorbed, to be so concerned with how they are, selfies, everything else. It's about them and their image. We gave them that legacy, and I'm so ashamed of that. So I think that we need to re-educate parents, and even if it means that everybody, including the parents, puts their phone into a box at night time which is locked up, and that they set an example, and that they have a toxic detox, 12 hours of good sleep, and you know, getting off that wheel where they have to constantly perform and constantly respond and constantly react. If that was something, you know, the internet's great. I mean, you know, we would never have, you know, been involved in our world as much if we didn't have the internet. But we also have to realise that we have to be responsible for it and with it, and parents need to set that tone.
And do you think maybe coming forward now, obviously with a generation who has lived through social media, do you think maybe when they become parents later on, they'll be more aware of the sort of the things that maybe they should have done when they were growing up, and like they'll be able to adequately, you know, change the way in which they treat their children?
I don't think so. I think technology is changing so quickly that nobody is able to keep up with it. I had a 15-year-old in here quite recently doing a little bit of work experience, and I asked him to create a questionnaire amongst his peers, and he discovered, and he's 15, that you can go online through your PlayStation. He didn't know that, but his friends knew it. Parents, I can guarantee, do not know that. So even though some parents are trying to protect their children from online and from accessing different sites, they have no idea that the children are probably accessing them anyway through their PlayStation. So I don't think it's changing. You must know that even the last couple of years, 5 years for you, what a difference. Do you know what I heard this morning? That during the economic crisis, which happened here in Ireland in 2008, started in 2008, that the effect of the banks and what they did to this country is older than the iPhone. So, I mean, you know, that what happened that time is older than the iPhone. So look at how quickly the iPhone has taken over our lives.
Yeah, well, I would be inclined to agree with you on that, because, I mean, when I was growing up, especially, there would be a lot of, like, maybe people would sort of turn away from working, you know, mainstream media, like watching television, and now a lot of people, including myself, watch YouTube, and that would be the big platform out there. But like, it's difficult to, you know, forget that YouTube was founded in 2005, and
Really?
that, like,
Yeah, I didn't
you know,
that, yeah.
and it's sort of strange, because I could never imagine myself growing up without YouTube, even though I'm older than YouTube as a platform. So it is definitely something that I think younger generations, especially even myself as well, would kind of forget how young the internet still is, and not be able to, you know, kind of regulate or even think about, oh, well, what else should I be doing? But I would say, though, that a lot of young people now are sort of coming forward about, you know, how their lives are influenced online. A lot of people are, I would say, aware now of sort of the mental things that they they need to sort of work around, getting offline and going outside and doing different things.
But do they do it though? They might know that, but do they do it?
I would say so, to be honest.
Really?
I suppose maybe there's, I suppose it depends on which person you ask, but at least, and you can take this with a grain of salt because I have no statistics to back it up, but personally in my experience I find that people who would have been online or on, social media or what for a while, when they get to around 16, 17, 18, they'll start to see like, well, this is the person I was years ago and I didn't enjoy the stuff I was doing then, so they'll tend to focus more on going out and, talking to people and so much as, going out with friends. And college is a massive thing for that as well. Like a lot of it is still obviously run through social media, hosting events and all that, but people do generally tend to back away from it, I'd say a little bit. But no, I do agree with you, probably just need to be addressed a bit more. So, okay, so after that, just to sort of roll back a little bit, one of the questions, just as you were growing up, like obviously you talked about your family was being influence on you. Was there anybody particularly in your family that you figure was an influence, or even someone outside your family that was a big influence into who the person you became today?
Yeah, I'd say my mother. My mother was, as I said, there was eight children. In those days as well, the father tended to be the quiet person in the corner, and the mother, typical Irish mother, would take over everything. But she made each one of us, we lived in a small 3-bed semi-D house, 10 of us. And in England, we had to live in England because my father couldn't find employment over here. So when I was born, I was a year old, we moved to England and lived in this house, 3-bed, semi-D, for 11 years. But we thought we were the wealthiest people on the road. We thought we had everything. And our mother made us believe that we could achieve anything and everything. So we had that inner confidence always growing up. So I think that, so when I started Pieta House, it never dawned on me that it wouldn't work. It never dawned on me at all.
So you always had sort of the idea that if you put your mind to something, you can do it, maybe, is it?
It's not even putting your mind to something. I just, anything. It didn't dawn on me that I wouldn't get it or wouldn't. There wasn't that much in many things that I tried to achieve. But if I did, it never dawned on me that I wouldn't achieve it.
Just to sort of, again, just to sort of reiterate, you talked about your family was very Catholic and you obviously grew up with those beliefs. So how did you find that your religious beliefs sort of influenced the person you are and how you view the world around you when you were growing up, or even today?
I still am a practicing Catholic. I don't think I would survive without my faith. And remember, your religion and your spiritual life are very, very different. You can follow a religion, follow a church, and have no spiritual life, or vice versa. You could have a very strong spiritual life and not belong to any religion. I happen to enjoy the rituals of following a particular religion. My faith is something completely different. I believe that I am where I am today because of my faith. And it is a great source of comfort when things are difficult. And it's something that whatever the person's belief is, whether they believe in the universe or a higher being or God or whatever, studies will show that we need something to believe in outside of our normal day.
Do you think maybe, especially obviously now Ireland's becoming a lot more secular, especially in its religious beliefs, how would you, because there's a lot of people who, they may be atheist or agnostic, and a lot of them will still say that, they can still find meaning within their life.
Yeah.
And so would that be what you're trying to kind of touching on, in the way that spirituality can still be separate from religion?
Exactly, absolutely. And, I also think that church, religion should be, because we are living in such a diverse community now, that they should be very separate from law. We see a huge division now between church and state, and that's right, because the other way, we're not respecting anybody's other belief, whether they're agnostic or they're Muslim or whatever. And I think that's really important, that we do respect everyone.
Just other thing, just to touch on about religion, I'd like to get your thoughts on this, because I think maybe a lot of especially younger people now would kind of stray away from religion, or maybe they'd be involved in religion, but they may be sort of still, really questioning, which is a healthy sort of thing to do, is always question your religion. But one of the things I've always struggled with was the idea that, well, I am a practicing Catholic as well, but I would always struggle with, well, really, do I believe in everything that I'm hearing? Because obviously, like, let's say, for example, like, majority of the time I would agree with the church on that, you should love thy neighbour and a lot of the Ten Commandments as well. But then you hear stuff like saying that, the church came out against gay marriage, and it's kind of difficult to sort of maybe say, like, because I think people give this perception, it's like, you're either all with it or you're not with it at all. And I feel like maybe that's what I'm in at the moment, but I just wondering, how would you say that people sort of, how is it nearly juggle those two things together?
10, 20 years ago you couldn't have, but you can now. And in fact, the church leaders in many ways are making that much easier for people. But the core for me is the Ten Commandments. If I follow the Ten Commandments, I'm not really straying. As far as the gay aspect of the church not acknowledging, the thing is, they're man-made rules, and you need to realise that church rules are man-made rules, and that we've lost sight sometimes about the Ten Commandments, which is God's rules. And I think that we have no right, none of us has the right to judge anybody else, regardless of their religion, their orientation, whatever. And I think, sometimes if you just follow blindly rules, man-made rules, you then fall into the trap of always judging others.
I suppose sort of to go off that now, just onto a different sort of aspect. Obviously, you became a senator recently in the last few years under Enda Kenny, and just to wonder, what was the reason that you decided maybe, okay, I'm going to leave Pieta House and become a senator?
I didn't. That didn't happen like that at all. I haven't got a political bone in my body.
Okay.
So I was with Pieta House and working also with Solace House in New York, and I got a phone call from Micheál Martin asking would I become a senator. So the Taoiseach has 11 nominations that he can choose whoever he likes from any walk of life to become a senator. There's no election, there's no going around to all the different universities, there's nothing. They ask you the question, would you become a senator? So Enda Kenny gave Micheál Martin 3 of those nominations, and he said to Micheál Martin, you can choose anybody you like. And Micheál Martin phoned me one day, never met him, and asked me, would I become a senator and represent mental health in this government? And that's how. So when he asked me first, I said, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be with any party. And he said, no, you can be an independent. So how could you refuse that? You're the privilege of that and the honour of serving your country and your government. I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. And it meant that I've always worked in the third sector, we call it, where charities and sort of an activist for mental health. Now it's given me the opportunity to fight that fight inside. So that's why I agreed to go in.
So one of the questions I kind of have is, obviously when you're in Pieta House and then you became a senator, was there overlapping ways in which you conduct your business, or did you kind of have to change the way in which you did it, or was there any sort of shift in your, I wouldn't say personality, but in the way you did things around when you were working?
As far from a political point of view, no, because I was always giving out as the CEO of Pieta House about the government, and I'm still always giving out about the government, so there was no shift at all. The chance of me being asked back again as senator is slim to none, because I've done nothing but cause trouble since the day I got in here. But what has probably changed is that I can see the way politicians are viewed. They're not viewed very kindly. Now, I'm still viewed kindly because people still associate Pieta House with me. But I actually feel sorry for politicians. It's a harsh environment. You're as good as your last whatever, and we have to remember, whether we like politicians or not, they all believed that they could make changes to this world, and that they all believed that they could bring good. Now, because they get in here, and once you get in here, it's like a bubble. You know, you're in a different world. They also have to toe the party line. So their wishes and desires for their country doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
You know, so I suppose my view to politicians has changed. I still will give out about them, and I'll still give out about policies, and still give out about the HSE. But really, you know, it's given me an insight, and that's been a very interesting experience.
Do you think maybe there's definitely a certain mentality that you kind of have to have when going into politics?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you have to have certain characteristics. I don't have them. Anytime I speak in the chamber, I get very emotional because I'm talking about the people who are suffering from mental health issues and are receiving no help whatsoever in the services that are not available. So I am the worst sort of person you could have in here because I'm really whinging when I'm in the chamber, whereas politicians they're very eloquent in the way they speak. They know exactly how to hit the right notes, and I don't have that. So I said actually to Claire, my assistant, that I'm a rubbish senator, to be perfectly honest.
Do you think maybe though that there's something needed in a change of like attitude, because obviously there's always discontent with the government, but like do you think maybe that if there was something, like you describe yourself as being maybe a bit more emotional, would you say that maybe that there is a lack of emotion mainly with some politicians then?
There's, without a doubt, there's a lack of emotion, and they can't afford to have that emotion. This is their life work. This is not my life work. But the other thing is, what I really believe, and this again is looking from the inside, many of the departments, like Department of Health, etc., it's the tail wagging the dog. You know, we have a Minister for Mental Health, Jim Daly. He's great, a lovely man. But he'll be gone when the next general election is here. He's going to be gone. So someone else is going to come in. And instead of creating a 10-year plan that will tackle everything, and that whoever becomes the next Minister for Mental Health must take up that mantle, must take up that baton and run with it. And that's how it should work. Regardless of what party, regardless of who it is, a 10-year plan to roll out and implement it, and to take back some of the power from those departments.
But obviously you said there just earlier that you thought that you maybe wouldn't make a great, well, maybe I'm paraphrasing, but that you wouldn't make a great minister or something because you'd maybe be a bit more emotional than the rest of them. What sort of was the I'm trying to figure out how to explain this now, but what would be the sort of mentality that you had when you were going to, say, the presidential elections? So, I mean,
that main sentence that I kept repeating over and over, the president is above politics. The presidential office is above politics, and so it should be. It's not always, but it should be. Just getting back to your piece about the minister, if I was Minister for Mental Health, I would be brilliant, because I would be angry. I'd have arched eyebrows from the moment I went into the office, and I would absolutely make changes and not accept anything, because I know what I'm talking about. So, you know, most of the ministers who go there in that role do not have mental health backgrounds. None. They might be business people, or they might be whatever, but they have no mental health background. So I know what I'm talking about. As far as the presidential role is, I really wanted to create a culture of positive, good mental health, that we're not afraid as a country to speak about it, to deal with it, and that I think the president can gather people around the person and bring people on board. And the only way things are going to change in this country is when we have the power of people. Look at darkness into light. You know, 200,000 people walking on a particular morning in Ireland. Think of all those communities that are pulling together to try to remove the stigma of suicide. Now, if you could, as a president, garner that energy from people, you could make changes without waiting for any government or any Department of Health to make we could make the changes.
Yeah. And I think when I was doing some research for this interview, I was looking, obviously, you did an interview, a podcast with a journal, and you described how, different presidents maybe embody, certain things at the time. So Michael D was all for arts and culture, and so obviously you said if you were president, you'd be like a president for mental health. And so do you still think that regardless of whether you got elected or not, you still got the message of mental health out there?
I think I did. I think people certainly will. People know me better because of the election. If someone had said, like you said at the beginning, who the hell is Joan Freeman? At the beginning of the election, nobody would have known. But if you said Joan Freeman, who's the founder of Pieta House, they would have put the two together. Now I think it's Joan Freeman and mental health, the two words put together. And I think if I achieve nothing else, I'm so glad I achieved that. At least even if people said, what a rubbish thing to run for mental health, at least someone's saying mental health.
Yeah. And do you think now that Michael D did get elected that he'll have to address mental health in a more sort of forefront because it obviously became so prominent when you were running?
No, he won't.
You don't think so?
No.
What do you think he will focus on?
Exactly what he did in the last the last office. Yeah.
How did you find running for president? Because I don't know, it just seems like if somebody was to run for president, obviously it would really take a toll on you. I think maybe, especially the debates, like from a personal standpoint, for me watching them, I thought they were sort of very poorly handled, to be perfectly honest. And that's no offence to you, obviously, it's just the way I think RTE went about doing it. How did you find it?
So, first of all, it was the best thing I've ever done in my life. One of the best things I've ever done in my life. I was energised. I had the greatest privilege of travelling all around the country and meeting people. I fell in love with Ireland all over again and the Irish people. So it was actually fabulous. But also it's very challenging. I had a ball of fear from the moment I'd wake up in the morning until I went to bed. And I'd wake up with that same ball of fear every morning. And the debates, that was part of it. And what made it fearful is that people were trying to see what was wrong with you, or what could you pick out that was wrong, instead of saying, what's good about you? I mean, if you were going for a job interview, you'd be talking about your strengths, and they would be trying, your future employer would be trying to find your strengths. What good can you bring to this job? But the way that it's handled, the presidential election is handled, it's harsh. And it's harsh because you're not given the opportunity to sell yourself in a positive way. You're defending yourself. Those debates are all about defending yourself, not selling yourself.
Yeah, good. Actually, that's a very good point, because I remember especially when I was reading about it, there was a lot of articles mentioned that how people were only focusing on Michael D and his private and him taking the private jet, and then when they were talking about you, it was only about the Iona Institute, or it was to do with the loans and so on. But nobody really talked about, like, well, what does this president want to do if they get into office? So I think one of the things, especially what you might have found frustrating, correct me if I'm wrong, was that there was no real discussion of what the vision of the presidency was for the next 7 years.
Yeah.
And so obviously you've outlined that mental health would have been a key, would have been the centre of all that had you gotten elected. What else would you have done over the 7 years had you been elected?
Yeah, so again, using that power of people, the community is at the heart of achieving anything in this country. And it, even more so I realised that when I was going around the country during the campaign. My dream as president would be that community would support community. So for example, I went to Tipperary town, and there's high unemployment, very high. I mean, I spoke to a group of 6 years. There was absolutely no future for them in Tipperary. And yet other parts of Tipperary is really wealthy, the studs and the horses and all that sort of thing. But this Tipperary town came together as community, and they provided services free of charge for each other, where the government wasn't able to. And it was a real taste of love of community. And I think encouraging that, making each county and each community in each county fall in love with themselves and be responsible for themselves, to to me would have been another part of the presidential role.
Yeah, of course. The community thing really actually connects to me as well because I actually grew up in Sligo and I only moved up to Dublin when I started my secondary education. But like obviously one of the big things when I was down in Sligo was everyone always knew everyone. Like you could meet anyone on the street and you'd have a good chat with them or whatever.
Yeah.
And especially after the crash, like you could notice that maybe there was sort of the soul was nearly sucked out of it. Nearly like shops closed down. I know for particular as well, a town I lived in Sligo, but obviously Roscommon was one of the big places to sort of fall to the recession. Because a town near enough to me, Boyle, like that, literally shops were closed. It was completely dead.
Wasn't
It was awful, yeah. And then, but I think when I came up to Dublin, then like it was, I wouldn't say they were doing great, but they were obviously a lot better. And but the one thing it did lack was probably a community, I'd say.
Dublin.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and this is another thing that I used to give out of that during the campaign, was that Dublin lives within a bubble. Nothing exists outside of Dublin. No town, no county. And that's the government's fault. And that's why I thought, as president, I would empower every county to be its own capital. Because if we're waiting for Dublin to do anything, and I'm a Dub, by the way, I'm married to a Dub, but if we're waiting for Dublin to do anything, it's not going to happen. People need to take charge and control themselves in their own county.
Do you think a big thing maybe has to do with that is industry, especially because I remember Dell obviously set up offices down in Limerick a while back, and I think they closed for a while, and I'm not sure if they're reopened now. But
Really, yeah.
yeah, but do you think maybe that there's so much? Obviously, you said that Dublin exists within a bubble, but there's so much emphasis put on establishing big businesses within Dublin. Do you think maybe it needs to be spread out a bit more?
I'll tell you what the problem is. It's not. Why should big businesses establish themselves outside of Dublin? We have two problems. We have internet. The internet is a massive problem across the country. Dublin is fine, but the rest of the country. So no big business will go to an area where there's problems with the internet. The second thing is the way we commute. Our infrastructure isn't too bad, but it could be a million times better. And so therefore, if the infrastructure is good, people will travel to other parts of the country, or they will travel from the country to other parts of employment. So we can't expect big companies to put themselves down in the back of nowhere, or even if it is in a city or near a city, if we don't support them with the internet and with infrastructure.
Yeah, so I suppose obviously I wholeheartedly agree with you on the transport system. I got in this morning. Honestly, you'd never know if you were going to get in on time or not. So, but how do you really how do we sort of get to a stage where there is better transport and there's better jobs? Because obviously, to me, it's all well and good, saying, well, we need this and we need that, but how do you manage it nearly?
You have to stop thinking at a national level. So, and what I mean by that is, and again, I'm only just drawing on experience in my own life. So take Darkest into Light, which is a phenomenal success when it comes to gathering people together. For that to happen, it was pointless launching it from Dublin. So we would do what we called a whistle stomp tour. We'd go to every single county and launch it. And we would launch it through the radio, local newspapers. We would, encourage committees all around that county. They took charge of it. It wasn't coming from orders from Dublin. They took charge of it. That's why it worked. And I believe the same way. We have to stop thinking instructions and direction comes from Dublin. You need to do it yourselves. I met, I can't remember which county it was, but someone who took on the role of bringing internet to the community, to this building where it became an office hub. And several, at least 20 companies were in this office hub sharing this building. The internet was perfect, parking, everything else was sorted. That generated more business in that area. So when counties take control, and there's amazing people in every single county who love their county, who want to make things better, you garner all those people and encourage them.
So now, just correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
is it more that you're sort of advocating that, sort of communities sort of take up and they govern themselves nearly, and then at the end of the day it'll all sort of be in Dublin, but like they won't tell them what to do, they'll just kind of do it nearly, is it?
Dublin will try to always control. The government is based in Dublin, remember, they always try to control, the rest of the country. Of course, it has to. But if you want to see change happen, stop waiting for the government to make the changes for you, because it's not going to happen.
Do you think maybe the mentality behind what you're saying, do you think it maybe does stem exactly from the roots that you're on about, that your principles are really, rooted within family and everything, and sort of like everyone looking after each other, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, we Irish are brilliant at it. When I went to New York to bring Pieta House to New York, I went straight to the Irish community. Extraordinary. I mean, within 2 years, Pieta House had been established. It's now called Solace House. There's two centres in New York. That's because of the Irish. Because again, they were thinking of their own insofar as all the Irish who are undocumented, or who are lonely, etc., etc. But then that generosity spread to other communities. So at this point in New York, there's more people who are not Irish coming to the services, which is extraordinary.
Well, I suppose I'll get on to the second to last question, but one of the things I want to know, what is next for Joan Freeman after the Senate?
So I have started my own little company. It's called the Freeman Health Group, and so I have had this notion, an idea about suicide in Ireland, that the government has created policies and a strategy. There are charities like Pieta, but then there's a third group that we need to target, and that's the people themselves. And what I mean by that, I mean at a corporate level. So if, for example, and this is, people who are in trouble will go to, the likes of Pieta or whatever. Government sort of dictates the strategy of money and budgets and things like that. But at ground level, so if you go into a company and you're working, say, Google or whatever, and Google and Facebook have put in strategies in their company where the person can have their breakfast at the crack of dawn and their dinner at the end of the evening, and there's a gym there and there's resting places. In other words, they have those people, the employees there, for 8 to 12 hours a day. Okay? And what you have to realise is that people are working together for 8 to 12 hours. They're spending more time with their colleagues than they are with their family. And who knows better what sort of form your colleague is in? Who knows better than what's going on in your life? And yet, if the colleague is aware that someone is not in a good place, they're loath to ask. They don't want to ask that question. They're afraid to ask. So my next part, my dream, is to get into those companies and absolutely blow the thing about mental health, to reach out, to use the compassion that's embedded in each one of us, and to arouse that compassion so that we can reach out to each other. And that alone will reduce suicide in this country.
Sounds, more than admirable, to be perfectly honest. So I suppose the final question is, so after you're gone and I'm gone and hundreds of years down the lines, how would you like people to remember Joan Freeman?
I have this conversation with my husband all the time. And so I want written on my tombstone that Joan Freeman was an amazing wife and an extraordinary mother.
And just that.
That's it.
Well, thanks very much for sitting down with us today, and